Well, hello, America. This is Al Palmer, United States Navy Commander, retired, and I'm here as a host of Stars and Stripes. It's a podcast put on by STARS, which is the organization that stands together against racism and radicalization in the services. And we're here to talk today about a little bit about some of the part that's radical today and the things that we face both in the military as well as in our society today. It's going to be discussing the communism and socialism and Bolshevism that exists and has existed for a while in our country. To do that, we've got a panel discussion today with five of the people I would call true experts in this subject matter. Colonel and Dr. Ron Scott is our president and CEO of STARS, and he's an Air Force Academy graduate from way back in 1973. And we're happy to have him here. He's an old fighter pilot, a pilot in the Air Force. He's done just about all you can do and still stay alive in the Air Force today. And another one is Colonel James Atticus Bowden. He's a military academy graduate, West Point, 72. And Jim has written notably about Marxism and all the isms as well. And we're happy to have him with us as a part of the MacArthur Society also. Dr. Mihaela Fletcher she grew up in Romania and she became a diplomat in the country, managed to escape, got married to an Army officer, and then became a nurse practitioner, and she teaches today in North Carolina. Dr. Alex Markowski is an engineer, grew up in the old Soviet Union as a lecturer and a writer on the isms as well. And one of my favorites too, Dr. Stan Ridgley, a professor at Drexel and an author, and he's written a really good book about brainwashing the students in Bolshevism. So anyway, welcome to all of you. It's good to have you here today. And with that, Dr. Scott, why don't you kind of lead off a little bit with us here and tell us what the issue really is with the continued emergence of socialism and communism in the country. Where does it come from? What do we do?
Thanks, Al. And I'm honored to be on this panel with these esteemed individuals, all of whom I know very well and respect. For me, the wake-up call was 7 July of 2020. That's when a friend of mine alerted me to a 3-minute video put out by the Air Force Academy football coaches chanting Black Lives Matter. 2 months after the George Floyd incident, so I could understand, sentiment was running pretty high across the country that summer. But in trying to take that video down, because it really was not a good reflection on the Air Force Academy, I discovered that Black Lives Matter was actually fueled and advanced by trained Marxists. And so that became a discovery opportunity for me. Lieutenant General Rod Bishop, Mike Rose, John Brockman, four of us got together and realized we can't just sit by and watch this happen. We need to do something. And that's was the creation of STARS, that 3-minute football coach video. We are now sharing what we've learned across the nation in an American Creed presentation, what it is, why it's worth preserving, and the threat to that creed, which is essentially Marxism in its various forms. So that's how STARS got started, and I look forward to a conversation here today with my esteemed colleagues here.
Well, and Jim, you had a similar problem at the military academy, did you not?
Yeah, I do. First one, bio correction. I'm not a retired colonel. The the problem is there's this called cultural Marxism. But I'm going to go and cut to the chase if I can, in terms of talking about
Sure.
Marxism and everything. So, my background, I taught it at the military academy 40 years ago. That's a long time ago. Taught American government, public administration, and research and methodology for the social sciences. And my last job in the Army, which was in 1992, was an Army futures study that took the Army out, the United States and the Army out to the years 2000, 2015, And I followed that with 20 some years of work in military futures, primarily Army and Air Force futures. So who are you going to fight? Where are you going to fight? Why are you going to fight? That inevitably led to the issue of ideologies and what happens. So I'm going to cut to the chase with this. Culture commands, ideas motivate humankind for good and evil. And with ideas, you can think outside your culture, and ultimately, cultures can change. They change over time. Ideas have genealogies. And where we are today, I go back to the ideas of the French Revolution being in contrast and in competition, antagonistic to the ideas of the American Revolution, and the worldview of the French Revolution, consequently, being contrary to the biblical worldview of the American Revolution. And that sets the stage. I know others are going to say a lot more, but that's where it all begins. It goes back to the French Revolution, American Revolution in our case, and it has evolved forward. So there's a lot more, but I'm not going to. I'm just throw that red meat out there for everybody.
Well, we have lots of red meat to talk about today. And Dr. Ridgley, you teach about this and you lecture extensively. I love your book, by the way, Brutal Minds. And it talks a lot about how that today exists within our academia. Can you talk a little bit about how that took root? Where did it come from? I mean, back when I was going to college many years ago, we were all interested in girls and sports cars more than we were in politics. And somehow that's crept in since then. What's your view of that?
Well, I think that if you're looking for an origin point, I think that motivates the infestation of socialism, qua communism, in the academy, where I work. It started a long time ago. It's intentional. It is purposeful. It is the realization of Herbert Marcuse's march through the institutions, the long march through the institutions, hearkening back to the terminology or the slogan used by Mao Zedong, the idea that for the left to win in a liberal democracy, a liberal republic like ours, you're going to have to seize the institutions. And this is something that Vladimir Lenin understood extremely well. And it's something that the neo-Marxists, the critical theory Marxists, of a neo-Marxist of the Frankfurt School of Adorno, Horkheimer, Erich Fromm, and others, is that you must seize the institutions, these organizations, the leadership of these organizations. And that is what is happening in America's academy. I see this all the time around me. The idea that social justice, which is the nom de plume of socialism or collectivism, one of the two great modes of organization of humankind, which is collectivism versus individualism. You see on the campuses the total embrace of collectivism in the form of social justice, which again is simply a placeholder for socialism. And I think that the book that I always hearken back to, of course, is The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek, who really defined what socialism actually is and the great battle that we're engaged in. And that's what we're engaged in right now, and it's one we're losing on the campuses. And I hope that in my meager efforts can help to turn the tide with our young people who are not I can tell you right now, our young people are not reading Friedrich Hayek's Road to Serfdom, and they're certainly not reading his Law, Legislation, and Liberty, the mirage of social justice. Instead, they're imbibing deeply the nostrums of Marx and Engels and many of their neo-Marxist bigani who have come along in the last decades or so, making socialism a lot more palatable and forgetting its execrable history. So that's where we stand right now. I wrote a book called Brutal Minds about this takeover of the institutions in the United States and primarily on the college campuses. And I hope that venues like this one, forums like this one, can continue to expose this malady on our college campuses.
And yes, and Stan, your book, by the way, copy here, Brutal Minds, excellent book, and it's
one of my favorites.
it's a read that you absolutely have to do. But now that you mentioned the origins of this, going back probably into the 50s, 60s, post World War II, you know, where did it come? I mean, this is like whack-a-mole. You have it come up here, it goes down, comes up somewhere else. You know, that didn't all happen accidentally, did it? It wasn't just the people all of a sudden coming to their senses one day and saying that socialism is better than capitalism. Somebody's behind this. Something is behind it. You know, what do you think that is, Ron? Do you have an idea?
Who's behind it? I don't think there's a single person that we can point a finger at. I think it's been a collective effort. People that the teachers' unions, for instance, are a big force in this play. And we have very wealthy billionaires. Obviously, George Soros, if we want to identify individuals, George Soros has been
That's a
actively
good start.
involved. And so you have people that I think have become somewhat demigods, that they don't believe in a God. They're only accountable to themselves. They take on the sense of power and they want to exercise it over other. It becomes very addicting to a lot of these people. We're in a situation now because our K through 12 educational systems have not been teaching our American creed. And so that vacuum has been filled by these ideologies, the socialisms, the Marxisms, the modern liberalisms, which is different from classical liberalism. So that void has been filled. So we have a lot of young people, probably two or three generations of people right now that have little to no understanding of the American Revolution that Jim talked about and how that contrasted with the French Revolution. So it's been drip, 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 and now here we are. We listened to a presentation yesterday by T. Casey Fleming, who just authored a very best-selling book called The Red Tsunami, basically sounding the alarm of the efforts by China, the CCP in particular, in infiltrating the American institutions. So we are in thin ice right now in America. And so, fortunately, panels like this, where we can talk about what's at stake and why it's dangerous and what can be done about it, and then to educate the American people and Western Europe. Western Europe is in far worse shape than we are. But I wouldn't identify a single person as responsible for this.
Well, I guess, and that's really the answer, isn't it? It's a way of doing business that's spread, and it's everywhere now. It's like cancer; it metastasizes into other places. Well, but that's our young people today, who have almost all of them grown up here in our country under the tree of safety and pretty much everything that they want to have. But that's different if you grew up in a communist country somewhere. Mahala and Alex both had the misfortune, I guess, of growing up under communism where they were young. Mahala, can you talk a little bit about what that was like in those days? But more importantly, what do you see today that exists in our country that rings bells with you when it comes up, like the Palestinian protesters, the folks that want to live under communist or socialist management in cities like New York coming up? So what do you see there as parallels?
So first of all, it's difficult. Unlike you lived in communism, like Alex and I did, it's impossible to understand because you were not there. When I came to this country, I came in search of a land of opportunity. I came here to get away from communism, to find freedom, and here I see it all coming back to life. So how is in communism? The government has, they started as socialists. That's the way they start. We were a Socialist Republic of Romania, but the Communist Party was in charge. So they got control, they had control of all aspects of everything, about what we eat, what we do, where we go. Total, absolute control, like extreme rationing of basic food, strict surveillance. We all lived in fear and trust. What I see here coming to this country, I remember when I came to this country and I had a husband who died, was in the military, Air Force officer. I remember he told me that he said, in this country, we have sexual harassment and abuse law, and we hold people accountable for what they do. And it's coming from a country where everybody is sexually, emotionally, physically abused since childhood. It's part of being born. We are like that, and then we are indoctrinated. I see it infiltrating everywhere. I see it going to education, going to school, military, to the healthcare. I see it in everywhere. It's everywhere. Unqualified people, and that's what they want to do. They want to find people who are ignorant, who don't know. That's what communists do. They find the vulnerable people who are ignorant. They put them into groups like Marx and Engels said, they're rich and poor. Now we have white and black, or again, rich and poor. The income discrimination is back again. Then they just make them feel like victims instead of making them feel resilient. Like I taught my child to be resilient. They make them feel victims. They manipulate them, eventually they get poor. They'll get rid of them when they reach their agenda. So I believe it's all controlled, and that's the best way to do it. Get through the leadership in a variety of services, especially education, health, and military.
But growing up, though, day-to-day living was a problem, was it not? With services, things like transportation, shopping, all those things were different, and that our young people don't experience today. Here,
yeah. They do not know what free transportation is. They do not know what grocery run stores are, that having a house assigned by the government to you. They don't know how they've been segregated, even that, like in New York City, for instance. It's in New York City, it's not in other places in New York. Just like in Romania, it was in Bucharest, in the capital, and probably Alex will tell you, probably in Moscow, not everywhere else. People are not having the same. So we had nothing. They indoctrinated us to believe we had everything, but we had nothing, and we were abused. There was nothing. No, we had rations, and what we got is actually not. We didn't get the supplies. We had the right to get the supplies. To get to that grocery store, you have a little card. They have cards like tells you how much you can use. It was like a full-time job. You have to stay there in hours. Families share time to be there, wait hours, and then you don't even know if you find that food that you have, like chicken feed or lard, the worst possible quality of food that you can think about. And gas, everything, gasoline, everything was rationed, and everybody was controlled and indoctrinated to believe that they had everything and they are lucky. And I believed it. We lived like in the allegory of Plato. We were like in the cave. We were all prisoners in the cave. We saw the shadows of propaganda, and we were all, whenever somebody got out, realized how life outside was. But some people, it's hard to adjust.
So controlling the things in your daily life was a way to get to all of the people and control that, rather than just pick out small groups and try and organize them. They had you, right?
They had, the only way to keep control of people is to get to people is to control them. They were absolute control, 100% control. We were all puppets. We were all controlled.
So what would you say to some young Gen Zer in New York City today about what could happen when they start controlling things like grocery stores and in transportation, housing? It sounds like the same thing you're talking about. What would you say to that young person today?
They have no idea what reality is. They really think the mayor, New York City Mayor Mandani, promises them paradise, but it's not paradise. It's all deceptions. It's all lies. They have no idea what it is, and when they'll find how bad it's going to be, it's going to be too late. It takes, and I'm looking at what's happening in Romania, I would say it takes like at least 3 generations to get somewhere. Once you get there, you never go back. It's so they just don't know. They just need to get educated, read these books that you guys were talking about, and be resilient and get a job and work. Don't wait for the government to give you things. Just do it for yourself. They just don't see what it is. And my child knows it because I taught him. But these people who are born here, they don't know what freedom is. They have no idea, because what limitation of freedom is, because they had it. They were born with freedom and they were promised even more, which is actually just lies. They are going to get violation of human rights, political repression, corruption, abuse, poverty. They're going to be equal in their misery, in poverty.
And so, Alex, you had a similar story growing up in the old Soviet Union, and maybe even more to the point, your father and your family were involved in that as well. How do you feel about that?
Well, we keep talking about what had been. And I'm really curious, what that has to do with the United States. The average person would say, well, okay, it was terrible, but it was gone. And in America, socialism is democratic. It's different. So where is the relevance? What had happened in Eastern Europe 70, 80 years ago with what's going on in the United States? And I tell you what, very little. What we have dealing in the United States is completely different. And once I believe we talk about Russian Socialist Labor Party, where socialism was born practically, and how they split between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. And what you're talking about, totalitarian socialism that was established in Eastern Europe, and that collapsed. And as I said, now they say it's democratic, it's different. Until we define what socialism is, until we understand the problem with socialism and convey it to the people, we can talk a lot about what happened in the past, and they will tell you, well, but now it's different. So it's irrelevant. So let's define, you talk a lot about that using interchangeably Marxism, socialism, communism, whatever. But what's socialists really fighting for? What do they want? And how it affects our life and how it may change the United States. I'd like to turn discussion into that route, instead of talking about what happened in the past and how bad it was. Can we define socialism, really? My question to everyone.
I think you're on to it, Alex.
What we don't want.
Lead the way, Alex, because I simply don't agree with you, Alex. Ya nie soglасна, Alex. But because I think if we do not learn from the past and the mistakes from the past, then we're doomed, as George Santayana said, we are doomed to repeat those mistakes. And I think that the framework of socialism / Marxism / communism has served as the avatar of human destruction for more than 100 years. And I think that the mistakes that were made in the past, whether it be Fabian socialism, whether it be the nostrums of Karl Kautsky, whether it be the nostrums of Vladimir Lenin, Stalin, Fidel, Daniel Ortega, even the Kim Il-sung in North Korea, it's all virtually different parts of the same nasty doctrine. Mm-hmm. And I think simply dismissing and ignoring the past is a mistake.
I'm not talking ignoring it. I'm telling you
the past
has very little relevance to what's going on in the United States. Furthermore,
it has
if I
great
ask you
relevance with
what
what's
is
going on, Alex.
socialism, you
No,
can't
Alex, it has
define it.
great relevance going on with what's going on in the United
Okay.
States. I visited your Soviet
Well-
Union, and I visited East Germany at the height of the Soviet domination of East Germany. And I think that you do us a great disservice by disclaiming your own past and not seeing the model that is laid out there for us. Okay.
With all due respect, what is socialism? Can you define it?
Why don't you define it? You're the one who has a disagreement.
Wait
with what we're talking
a
about.
minute.
No, no,
Wait
no,
a
no, no,
minute.
no. You
Can
define
you
socialism,
define it?
Alex. Yeah, I certainly can define socialism as a form of
Okay, I'm all attention.
Now
Okay,
you
tell me.
define it. No, Alex, you
Tell
define
me,
it.
you
Now,
can't.
you brought it up. You have the disagreement with what's being said, and you've called for this definition of socialism. Lead the way, and I'll follow you.
So obviously, no one of you can define it.
No, obviously, you refuse to define what you're criticizing right
I
now.
will
You
define
define it.
but I ask you to
Go
define
ahead.
it.
Go ahead. No, I want you to
Yes,
define it. You brought it
it's
up.
terrible.
You brought it up. No, Alex. You're acting like an old
can't.
Soviet Tavadish right now. You define it, okay?
But you can't. You can't.
May I jump in? May I jump in?
Well, listen, Alex. I'm a political science major, a PhD
Jim-
in political science
Jim
from Duke
Bowden,
University, top 5 in the country. And I think that you are avoiding the question that you have indeed asked. You were avoiding the question, Alex.
Well, I will explain it to you, but I want to make
No.
sure. Well,
Hey,
don't
Divide
matter.
Tavadish. Divide
May I
Tavadish.
jump-
Let's get another voice in here.
Let me
gentlemen.
jump in real quick. I feel like I'm back
Jim,
in grad school.
You got the mic, Jim.
Okay.
There's no need
I
to
feel like
feel
I'm
that
back.
way.
All right, let
There's
me
no need to
talk.
feel that way.
Okay, let me talk. Let me talk. Okay?
I feel like I'm back in grad school.
Can I?
One second.
You asked me to define it. Let me define it.
Okay. All right. Well, all right.
Okay.
We're going to go past an hour. Go ahead.
Jim, it's yours. Okay, go.
Yeah, real quick. So I feel like I'm back in grad school. I went to 2 of the most liberal grad schools in the country. And I feel like I'm back there watching the academics. So I want to
Can
narrow
I
things down.
define it finally? Can you let me
No,
do
no.
it?
No, just wait. Hold
You
on.
can't.
Hold on. There's one definition. Social scientists, political scientists can have academic discussions forever. I think the point of this exercise, because it's stars, is what does this mean to quote unquote normies? What does this mean to everyday folks who don't have a political science background, who don't have a social science background, eyes will roll back in their head when they start hearing these arguments. Not that they aren't important within academic circles. So let me neck it down real quick. I led off with something about culture commands. And I just want to try and make this point. The ideas have genealogies. So it is, and they have long genealogies. And you can enumerate them. The ideas are finite. You can put them up on a whiteboard, 1 to N. This is what this ideology is. This is what this ideology is, etc. And you can track them 2 times. And my favorite example is it's hundreds of years from Augustine to Aquinas to the Reformation, with a simple idea of how do you know knowledge? Does the church know knowledge, or do you know knowledge? And what's the relationship between the church and knowledge? It's hundreds of years, and it develops over time. So the ideas that we're opposing go back hundreds of years. Today, they are expressed exactly as Mihaela was describing, where you break people down into identity groups, you break them down into hierarchies, you have grievances, which then become a reason they become something. You have gripes, which become grievances, which then become far more sinister, because for the left, whatever you want to call them, I call it the left. In order to have their way of living, when they're all based on their ideas about history, sociology, and economics are all false. And then when they try and force them on humanity and they fail, they have to have an enemy to blame. So let me close it with this. The cultures, when I say cultures command, within the United States, there are 4 original founding cultures. There are at least 2 since then, ethnic cultures, Black urban and Jewish urban. They came about in the late 19th century, early 20th century. There may be some more developing, like Tex-Mex Tejanos, and other groups, if they stay in large enough populations, those subcultures, which are regional cultures, and they've blended over time. In the North, especially, they've devolved into there's an urban-rural split. Those subcultures, which have a worldview, are fundamentally what it's all about. So the fundamental issues of who am I as a human being? Why am I on earth? What is my life about? What it is when I'm born, what are the opportunities that are ahead of me? What can I see? We have to translate all this political science stuff, and I'm a political scientist too. We have to translate them into plain American English to say, if you want to have a life, if you want to have freedom, here's what freedom means. Freedom means you're able to support your family. Well, how do you do that? Then we've got to translate those things in terms that people understand, that who are pragmatic and not political. That tracks anywhere. And also, I don't mean any disrespect to you two gentlemen who are making an argument, because Stan, I read your book and I love it. I am a huge fan. You have nailed what's going on in academic. And Alex, I have not read yours, and I'm going to buy it and read it. I have the greatest respect for y'all. I'm just saying we have to talk about what this means to normies. Let me flip it over to.
I want to add something.
Socialism for you finally? You challenged me to define it, but you wouldn't let me do it.
I would drop that. I would just drop that and move on, because the audience won't care.
Whom you're fighting, if you do not understand their intentions, if you don't understand what socialists are fighting for, how can you defeat them?
Well, that's and Alex, you make a good point, and I'll offer this. In reading about this in all of your books and all too, what I get is that socialism was the softer version of communism, because Marx and Lenin wanted to do something very different. They didn't want to just use a membership group from the proletariat. They wanted to establish in Marxism, communism, an authoritarian form of government that was classless. Is that not true, Stan?
What is socialism? I ask you a simple question. If you cannot define it, let me do it for you. But you don't seem to even willing to let me do it.
I
If you don't understand who you're fighting for, how you can defeat them.
I want to hear what you have to say, Alex.
Okay, can I speak?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, socialism consists of two parts. It is philosophy of equality. It's based on philosophy of egalitarianism, of economic equality. Well, so socialism is about economic equality. That's what all socialists tell us. Some people say socialism doesn't work. Well, and I tell you what, how it doesn't work if major political parties in the United States adopted Marxism and promulgate socialism. So politically, it certainly works. Economically, it's a little bit different. You say it doesn't work, socialism doesn't work. Whether things work or not depends on their goals, on their intentions. And if they serve their intention, it works. So socialism never promised you to create wealth. Socialism, again, promised you economic equality. And here's the thing, that's getting interesting. Because equality in wealth is oxymoron. The only example of economic equality was during primitive communism. By very nature, wealth is uniform. So equality in wealth can be only in poverty. And that's where we're going with it.
Let me offer this, though, Alex, let me offer this. Equality and equity are two different things. equity is what you're talking about when everybody has the same outcome. And I just don't think that's possible.
Let
But
me
it's not.
finish.
People are people. People have varying degrees of ability, of interest, and willpower. They're going to make of themselves different things along the way. We can't all be the same.
Okay. Again, equality can only be in poverty. Therefore, socialists very often say that we are for redistribution of wealth. As Obama once said, we have to take wealth created, I'm quoting not exactly, but that's what he said. We have to take wealth created by private markets and distribute it more equally. Well, no, it's not about redistribution of wealth. The ultimate objective of socialism is destruction of wealth. That's the only way economic equality can be accomplished. Therefore, we have to define socialism as ideology of poverty. And that will get to the brain of everyone.
So don't you think, though, that in doing that, what you end up
Well,
with
I
is
haven't finished.
not
I
okay?
have not
But okay,
So
go ahead.
let me finish. And and when we say that socialism doesn't work, yes, it does work. Look at every country where socialism become triumphant. It creates poverty,
Yeah.
create economic equality. So it does work because it serves their purpose. So in order to defeat them, we have to define them, not let them to define themselves. We define them. Now, they say now, and to such what I'm trying to say, that socialism works. And unfortunately, democratic socialism will work even better because it guided by democratically elected leaders. It carries the legitimacy of popular consent and will advance socialism equality through lawful, transparent legislation, unlike the coercion and mass terror that mark the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, and all other countries. That's where the greatest danger is. And if you look at it, they are triumphant. They're triumphant in New York. They will be triumphant in Illinois, and that they're triumphant in California. And the reason they are triumphant, because we are illiterates as a society. We do not understand whom we're dealing with. By the way, if we just look at the history, it tells us, even Aristotle, 2,400 years ago said, in democracy, the poor will have more power than the rich because there are more of them. And the will of majority is supreme. Therefore, Mensheviks were correct when they say that democracy is a road to socialism. We have to look at our democracy that deteriorated over the years. And now we have the whole party that promotes Marxism. That's where danger is. And you can talk a lot about what happened in Russia, Eastern Europe, and all the terrors. This time we can say that Bolsheviks did not win. Mensheviks won, who from the very beginning were advocated establishment of socialism through democratic way. They believe that democracy will lead them there. And it does right now.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I think that helps us a little bit there. Ron, what is your take on some of this? By the way, when we talk about what Alex just described, we are talking about history. We're talking about our history, but a little bit about the evolution of isms and how that's important today. Don't you think that's right?
Yeah, I do. And I appreciate what Alex was describing. And the question that it raises in my mind, Alex, is the destruction of wealth fully intended, or is it just a natural outcome?
Well, if you don't take it from me, take it from Lenin. In 1919, 22nd of April, 1919, was Lenin's 50th birthday. He probably had a little bit more vodka than usual, and he gave an interview to Morning Star, British newspaper, when he was saying, we tried everything to destroy capitalism. We expropriated their wealth. We sent them to Siberia. We executed thousands of them and couldn't defeat capitalism. But eventually what we did, we destroyed wealth. We created enormous inflation. We destroyed the money. And that's how we destroyed capitalism. That's what Lenin said. Check Morning Star. Well, when I was writing my book, I found that interview. It was reprinted in New York Times in 1919, probably 2 days, maybe April 23rd, something like this. Very teaching.
Well, the question I have for Stan is, given that is, while money ceases to be the currency, obviously we destroy wealth, doesn't the currency then become power? And is that the ultimate objective of socialism?
I didn't get it, I'm sorry. If currency is destroyed, the wealth is destroyed.
No, I think that Alex makes some very good points. I agree with him 100% in terms of the wealth-destroying capability of socialism. As soon as a little bit of capital or surplus is created, you immediately distribute that. You immediately seize that, and you pay off your middlemen bureaucrats, and a little bit of it trickles down. But what I think you just said to me, what happens when you destroy money or you destroy wealth, what becomes the currency? You find ration cards becomes the currency. Okay, if you decide you're going to control the production and distribution of goods, but you're going to control the currency as well. Anything that is worth anything finds its way onto the black market. I had the privilege, rather unpleasant privilege, of visiting Alex's country back when it was still the Soviet Union, and living in the city of West Berlin when it was still a divided city, and a lot of visits over to East Berlin to see how the communist system worked in practice. And when I was in Alex's country, I actually stood in a bread line just to say, years today, that I stood in a Soviet bread line, with the illumination that you get from doing something like that. And I think that Michaela, mentioned that you stand in line all day trying to find the goods that are worth standing in line for, and that exactly was what Soviet. Yeah, that's what the Soviet life was like. You're trying to find out what's in the stores, and if there's a line, you jump into it because you don't know what's being sold, but you know there's something good because people are in line for it. So I think that ration cards becomes your de facto means of distribution if you control the limits of how much people can buy. I think that the fact that 35 kopecks was the price of a loaf of bread in the Soviet Union and stayed that way. And the Soviets used to point to that as this wonderful example of communism in practice. But the problem was there was very little Soviet bread in the Soviet stores. And number two, the bread sucked, full of sawdust. So Alex's point that it's an economic system, it does not work. Political system, it does work. It works exactly as it's intended to work. It creates misery. I would say inequality of misery across and it destroys classes, letting us all devolve into the lowest class that society is capable of supporting.
And along the way, instead of having exceptionalism in behavior and in production in your country, or having some diversity in that, what Alex is right, what socialism does is it succeeds. But it succeeds only in creating mediocrity, not merit, not wealth. It brings everybody down, so nobody really succeeds and nobody fails, right?
Well, their own candidates succeed. They have, just like in communism, you have one candidate that's like pre-selected and play your game. So we are doing the same thing now, seems like. All control from the leadership.
You see, generally,
what does that offer?
Back to the past, and I want to drive you to the future.
But the future
Talk about the future.
I see. the future is going back to the past. Like if you don't have competition, if you don't have opportunity for everyone, if you make everybody poor, we are going back to the horrible past.
It was Winston Churchill that said, the farther you can look back into the past, the farther into the future you can see. So I think that this artificial cutting off of the past is not going to be useful to anyone. It should inform any types of solutions that one wants to propose.
It's not what I'm
Well,
saying. What I'm
human
saying
behavior
is
is that way.
populism in the United States is different from what you
I got
see
that.
in Europe. It has similarities. However, the way they're trying to do it is different. And we have to be aware of it and get certain education. The number of ways we can try to stop it. Although we have to probably start with our democracies that deteriorated over the years.
So, Al, if you could put up that slide, I think that brings us to today. We talk about history. In 1963, Congressman Herlong entered 45 goals of communism into the congressional record. Herlong, a Democratic representative from Florida, 1963, 45 goals. Yep. And this slide lists some of those goals that have already apparently manifested in America here, 60 years later. I would also offer that Stan had mentioned a couple books by Hayek. Another one I think that is particularly relevant for this discussion is one titled Fatal Conceit, The Errors of Socialism. Very, very powerful book. It's parsimoniously written, i.e. it's very dense. You read a sentence and you have to take a few minutes to digest it. But anyway, it's I am just really awed by the discussion because we've taken it to a level that most people don't really spend the time to think about, and that's the ambiguity of socialism, what it is, what it means, how it's playing out. And then when you see elections like in New York with Mamdani, an open socialist, and winning an election for the largest city in the world, it tells you that socialism right now is attractive to a lot of Americans. And I would submit that most of the Americans that voted for Mamdani were college educated from the white demographic. And so this is something that we need to take on. And so that's probably where we want to take the next discussion here is what can we do about it?
So among those things that they were successful with were things like education. And education is a foundation for all the young people that come into our society, particularly in the military. So how can you have a military that's got no education in our own creed, our own American values of individualism, when there are people telling you that in order to do things that are successful, you've got to be part of a movement, you've got to be part of a group. Our values as Americans are still individual. All of our rights under the Constitution are individual, and our freedoms are individual. So I think that's one of the things that we need to get back in to education. And any thoughts on that? Jim, what do you think?
Well, I tell you what, we all know what to do. We just don't know how.
How is important too, I guess, isn't it?
Well, and that's, I know Al is a pretty prolific writer, but I understand that recently many of the platforms that were happy to publish his analysis on current events are a little reluctant to do that now. You want to talk to that, Alex?
Well, look, I stopped writing, and I wrote to one of my editors. I said, I think my readers are too stupid, so I'm not going to write anymore.
No argument there.
Well, because, you see, we need some kind of organization. It has to be a party that has ideology, that have some kind of platform. We don't have anything, any of it. We just talk here on. I'm glad we have, of course. I'm glad then that it was organized and we exchange our opinions, but we need a lot more than that. You see, we have to talk about our democracy, because our representative democracy is no longer represent with the people. It represents terrorists, illegal aliens, rioters, habitual criminals, anybody but us. And we have to admit that current political environment is very conducive to spread of socialism. We witness intellectual stagnation present in American political dialogue. Americans thinking about socialism and trailing behind of the Russians or Chinese, neither education, no upbringing, no life experience equipped Americans to grasp the magnitude of socialist assault on American institutions. Consequently, what we see, the ignorant electorate often elects individuals who are demonstrably unqualified and have failed to possess even a basic understanding of history, economics, or critical thought. A few even, I tell you what, earn notoriety for inconceivable stupidity. Did I lose you?
No.
No,
No.
after 30 some years in Virginia politics, I would say amen.
Yes.
I would say amen. But let me go real quick. Politics is downstream from culture. So in the same way in warfare, you have the strategic level, the operational level, and the tactical level. In like manner, there is a cultural war that is fought in the 7 institutions that exist that shape this country. Primarily, the primary one being family, and second, religion. And then there's downstream from that, inside those institutions, there are the areas where Stan has written so clearly about education. And in education, it's going to take the political movement that Alex just mentioned in order to change that. Because not only do you have to change what's being taught, you have to go back and change who's teaching. So go look at like in Virginia, I've been trying to do my homework on what are the legal controls that the General Assembly has over every institution which grants an education degree in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Because until you change who's teaching what to get an education degree, you're not going to change the culture of Marxism that's being indoctrinated everywhere. I'll just hand that over to Stan.
I think the people versus process, people are dominant. Unless you begin to change the people that are actually in control of the levers of power in education, I'm referring to higher education now, and of course to a lesser extent to the public education system, you're not going to get much change or reform of anything. These people are committed ideologues. We find on virtually every website of every university in America a nod and a pin to the idea of social justice. This is simply a proxy for socialism, I think, as
Yep.
Alex so ably described. Social justice is nothing but a placeholder that you can say out loud right now for socialism. It's collectivism. And the idea that there's a collectivist God, if you will, or a canon of works on the college campuses that are being genuflected to in disparagement of the type of works that we've talked about with regard to Friedrich Hayek and the economist Thomas Sowell, economist Milton Friedman, economist all the way back to Carl Menger and Adam Smith. As long as there is this fealty to this socialistic, collectivistic God, then we are going to have real problems, because we can enact, surface reform all we want to. The president can issue executive orders all he likes. And then you'll find, as it is my campus, people, the bureaucrats nodding and saying, oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. But the people are still in place. The people who actually have enacted this structure on the college campuses whereby collectivism is exalted. Unless we begin to tackle that problem and recognize that problem, every solution we come up with will be the equivalent of a Band-Aid, I think.
So if that's the case, and the group behavior is exalted, how do we stop the exaltation process? Do we remove money? Do we move power from that? Because the people we're talking about, especially politicians, are going to like something or not like it based on their perception that they're going to get votes out of that, or if they're in business, they're going to get money out of it. So isn't that the intersection there that needs to be broken? Money and power?
I would say it's a lot more complicated than that. Lenin once said, you give me a child, 5 years old child, and I put the seeds in his brain that will never be uprooted. So you see where I'm going, where I'm going. When you have a generation that's been already indoctrinated in socialist ideas, difficult to uproot it. But first of all, you have to define your enemy clearly, and and offer some kind of alternative. I've been thinking of one alternative. What happened here? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm losing the vision, so I'm losing the picture sometimes. Oh, that's the voice of truth. Look, did you hear that? Okay.
Yes, we did.
Well, what I was saying, as I said, we need a political party. We have to have an ideology, develop new ideology. One of the ideas I can offer, once I read the essay by Andrew Carnegie. He wrote it in 1980 something. Okay. It's called The Gospel of Wealth. When he advocated entrepreneurial society, seeking glory in economic prosperity and philanthropy. You see, we allowed our government to get in the business of making money. That is a big mistake. Government is in the business of spending money. And when government gets in the business of making money, he creates a monopoly. And perfect example of it, infrastructure. We can't build anything in this country anymore because government controls it. So we have to just follow our founding fathers who advocated for smaller government. And my thinking, why they advocated for smaller government? Because government is institution of corruption. The bigger government, the greater corruption. And we see it right now in the United States. As I said, we can't build anything. We spend billions of dollars to build a rail in California, and we can't build it. I wrote an article, I don't remember the name of it, but I wrote it in American Infrastructure magazine. When I talk about American corruption in infrastructure, I had numbers, I had projects, I had everything. I was advocating for privatization of infrastructure, get government out of it. In 1930s, for example, private enterprise could not build Hoover Dam. So government step in. But today, private enterprise can build anything. We don't need government in it. They build private roads. The government build the road and charges fee, and there is no competition to it. So every time they raise tolls more and more. As a matter of fact, they take something that built with taxpayers' money in 30s, 40s, and 50s, and now charging tolls for it. So we have to bring government to its knees, and we have to create a new ideology that would confront that ideology of poverty. We have to create ideology of wealth. And I think Carnegie probably had something when he wrote that article, very interesting article. It's very short, but very interesting. So bring back capitalism into infrastructure, into building anything. Capitalism can do it. And most important, again, I can emphasize even more and more, we need some kind of a party or society or something that will have a new ideology. Republicans have no ideology, unfortunately. Democrats have. They got Marxism.
So, Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, let me build on what Alex just talked about. And Jim had mentioned earlier that politics is downstream of culture. Well, in 1915, Antonio Gramsci wrote, "Socialism is precisely the religion." And we know it's more of an economic type thing, as we just discussed, but religion takes on another dimension.
Yes.
Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. Now, nowhere in there did he mention government. And Alex mentioned the importance of government. Well, government is downstream of politics. And so we have to address those enablers of politics and subsequent of that, our government, by getting into our institutions and restoring them. And I would submit that because religion tends to be the overarching moral arbiter of political decisions, that we need to reform, refresh the importance of our Judeo-Christian grounding in America. And that's anathema to a lot of people, especially in the universities. But when you look at the Declaration of Independence and the inspiration for our government via the Constitution, it was clearly grounded in an understanding that there are natural laws and that there are inalienable rights given to us by a creator. And so at some point, I really think we need to have the courage to be a little bit more open about that and to refresh that part of our institutions.
Can I combine two things here? Alex, I appreciate what everyone's just said. Alex, I don't think we need a new ideology as in a separate, distinct one. I think what we need to do is take an existing ideology, and again, the ideas and the worldview of the American Revolution, which still exist today and are still held by about half the country. They still believe has the exact same worldview. If you listed the ideas, we think the exact same things. So you take that ideology, that worldview of the American Revolution, the biblical worldview of the American Revolution, but it has to be adapted for the realities of what's going on in the world, what's going on in our place in our economic era and technology, and adapt it so that it can be articulated to kids in high school, like one of my grandkids who just graduated from high school, to articulate, here's what your future is and can be if we do the following things, and to show them there are opportunities. So I believe I wholeheartedly agree with you that the Republican Party is not an ideological party and that you do need an ideology. I would offer that it exists, and there may be, I can think of one champion. I don't want to, this is not a political broadcast, but I can think of one person who probably grasped that, who's in power, not national power, but other power. And I believe it's adapting that to the economic realities of today, and then talking about what needs to change to create greater opportunity, greater freedom, and greater agency, individual agency.
But it's also the notion that our country still, to this day, is a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's who makes the government, not the other way around. And so that's contrary to national institutions and of communism, Marxism, whatever. They're either going to try to tell all the people how to work, or they're going to eliminate classes and tell everybody how to live. Those are not things that go with our American values. And that's exactly what we're teaching, that Ron is so up to his eyeballs in, the American creed. What are we about? How are we the antidote to some of those things that do exist? And that may be the avenue we're talking about here. So Ron, what do you say about that? Is that a bigger role for STARS then?
Well, just an amplification. Right now, we're capacity limited. And so the more audiences we can reach, and the sooner, the better. We've been given this since March, and all of the audiences have responded in a very positive way. And a lot of people in the audience, we were just reminding them of what they learned in school, but we're talking people that are 70, 80 years old. The younger generation, not so much. So we've got a great story to tell, and the American people deserve to hear it, so they can embrace what we have and protect it.
Knowing that we are indeed an exceptional country, and we stand out among all others, and you balance that against the countries that have adopted some form of an ism, who have not succeeded, as Alex points out. They've been very successful at what they do, but what they do, unfortunately, doesn't produce positive results.
Well, and we need more Stan Ridgleys. Stan has the courage to write what he's been writing as a professor at Drexel University, a prestigious university. We need more voices like that on our university campuses.
Yes, we do.
Oh, there's one other thing.
I'm grateful that we've had the opportunity to listen to Stan today, as well as Jim and Alex and Mihaela. You've all got important pieces of this story about the isms that are on the rise today. And I'm happy that we've had the opportunity to hear all of you. It's been a lively discussion, gang. And I hope that people will listen to that they'll also go out and then read your books that you've written, and things also like Jim does on our website, stars.us. You can find a lot of writings there that support all of this from the folks you've heard today, and also from the leadership of STARS, who are all amazing people. And I'm happy to have had you here today. And for our listeners, stay tuned. We're going to talk more about this. This is a new front for STARS, and we're going to be actively following this coming up in the future. Again, thanks to our panel for being here today, and we'll see you next time on Stars and Stripes.